In 1991, Nintendo had officially entered the 16-bit arena. The Super Nintendo launched in North America with a wave of hype and the strength of their market dominance since the late 1980s. But Sega wasn't about to back down. Their answer was a major price cut, a new pack-in game, and a bold new attitude. The Genesis console was reborn with Sonic the Hedgehog, a high-speed, attitude-packing platformer that didn't just compete with Super Mario World, it actively challenged it. Sonic was everything that Mario wasn't. Sonic was fast, edgy, and cool. With a price drop to $149 and a sleek new marketing campaign, Sega had found its stride. For the first time, it started outselling Nintendo in North America. But all was not well behind the scenes. The growing success in the West heightened a rift between Sega of America and Sega of Japan. Tom Kalinske, the newly appointed president of Sega of America, had a vision of price cuts, bold US-focused marketing, and strong partnerships with Western developers. Though it was working successfully, Sega of Japan had reservations. The decision to pack in Sonic the Hedgehog with the Genesis wasn't initially well received by Sega of Japan. Though it made sense in the Western market, Sega of Japan resisted, wondering why would they include a surefire hit for free. Also directly challenging Nintendo was against some of the beliefs of the Sega of Japan board of directors. However, despite the friction, Kalinske's strategies were paying off, and Sega was riding high. The Genesis had carved out a market share of the US, something few thought possible just a year earlier. As Sega gained market momentum targeting older kids and teens with their edgier branding, the Super Nintendo showcased advanced graphical features with F-Zero and Pilot Wings using Mode 7. Sega's marketing in the US had put their Genesis system's technical prowess on center display, touting its superiority over the 8-bit NES. However, with its newer, flashier system, Sega would have a hard time convincing the public that they were still the better option. Sega of Japan had been working on an add-on to their system that would allow them to play CDs on their existing Mega Drive system. Sega of America couldn't wait to get their hands on the system, but Sega of Japan was extremely protective of the system, even from their own company. While Sega of Japan was developing the add-on to compete with the PC Engine, which was still a major force in Japan, it wasn't really as well received in the US. In North America, the Sega CD would represent a technical leap over their main competitor, the Super Nintendo. And while the add-on released in December of 1991 in Japan, it would take almost a full year for it to arrive in the United States. During that time, however, Sega still managed to gain more market share in the US, successfully keeping the pressure on Nintendo. Later that year, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 would launch globally on Sonic Tuesday in November of 1992, and it would become a huge commercial success. Nintendo would counter with major titles like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and Street Fighter II, which was initially a console exclusive at launch and was a massive draw for the Super Nintendo. This home version of Super Street Fighter II would bring in fans of the emerging fighting game genre and boost the system's popularity. And although the initial version of Street Fighter was released exclusively on the TurboGrafx CD, it didn't really gain much market share, and the TurboGrafx 16 began fading from all relevance in the United States as NEC struggled to compete. And though the Neo Geo AES would become a powerhouse of fighting genre titles, in 1992 and 1993, many of the titles the system would become known for wouldn't be out yet, and because of its high price, the system would continue to remain a novelty. Hoping to rebrand their image in a last-ditch effort, NEC would release the Turbo Duo, an all-in-one system combining the TurboGrafx 16 and the CD-ROM unit into a single, sleeker machine. With no extra add-ons, no system cards, and it just being plug-and-play, this was a system that would represent NEC's latch-ditch effort to remain relevant in a market that was becoming dominated by both Sega and Nintendo. NEC would even rebrand their mascot to compete with the more edgier tone of Sonic the Hedgehog. However, strong hardware and a great game bundle weren't enough. The Turbo Duo launched into a market dominated by Nintendo and Sega, two brands with far more presence, far more momentum, and much deeper pockets. While Sega and Nintendo seemed to be in a constant struggle on who could market their system more, NEC's American marketing was almost non-existent. Their ad campaigns were vague, unmemorable, and failed to communicate clearly what the Turbo Duo was, or why anyone should care. Also, at $299, the Turbo Duo wasn't cheap, and with most gamers unfamiliar with the TurboGrafx 16 brand, to begin asking consumers to spend more on an unknown system, no matter how advanced, was a tough sell. Its library, however, would continue to be filled with cult classics, fast-paced shooters, and colorful platformers, as well as rich RPG adventures. But with third-party developers locked into exclusivity deals with Nintendo, and NEC's shrinking shelf space in US retailers, most players never even knew these games existed. By 1994, the Turbo Duo had faded quietly from store shelves. Despite being one of the earliest and most innovative CD-based systems, it simply couldn't compete in a war where marketing and mindshare mattered more than tech specs alone. By the end of 1992, even though Sega had made large strides in dominating the US markets, Nintendo was still hot on its heels. In 1993, some major Genesis titles included Gunstar Heroes, Shinobi 3, but almost all other games were overshadowed by their biggest release of the year, a home port of the hit arcade game Mortal Kombat. Gamers of the time knew that this was the version to get, not the one on the Super Nintendo, as there was a code that would offer uncensored blood, making the title edgier and more adult, and kids couldn't get enough of it. The Super Nintendo would transform the blood to sweat just like the Genesis, but there was no way to change it, at least not without hacking the system. The Super Nintendo would counter with titles like The Secret of Mana and Super Mario All-Stars, but the biggest of the year for them was Star Fox. As Sega was touting their technical superiority with the Sega CD, Nintendo would market the new Super FX chip and Star Fox as a way to play 3D graphics on their system without buying any additional console add-ons. And though it was rumored that Nintendo would release a CD add-on of their own one day, the add-on had failed to materialize, amidst drama between Nintendo, Sony, and Philips. And Sega would be in enough trouble of its own. When Mortal Kombat released with the ability to unlock uncensored blood mode on the system, parents and lawmakers took note at how violent video games were becoming in the home space. Eventually, the whole situation would lead to Senate hearings on video game violence and the foundation of an electronic software ratings board that would give parents an idea of a game's content so they can decide whether or not to get it for their kid. Though this would be seen more as an attack on Sega with their more adult and edgier branding, it actually ended up helping the system. As games like Night Trap for the Sega CD were showcased in the hearings, many kids would discover that this game existed, and they wanted to try it out as it seemed to be a game that they were forbidden to play. In my experience though, the game really doesn't deliver on that promise. One humorous note is that Nintendo testified in the hearings that they would never allow a game like Night Trap on one of their consoles, and it eventually released for the Nintendo Switch years later. Between 1991 and 1993, Sega would continue to appeal to teens, action fans, and early adopters of the best technology. Super Nintendo would draw in families, RPG fans, and those loyal to Nintendo's classic franchises. As a result of this console war, many third parties started breaking their exclusivity deals with Nintendo, as Capcom, Konami, and others began releasing titles on both platforms. The advertising war would intensify as well, with bold, often aggressive messaging from both sides, as video game magazine subscriptions boomed, driving console loyalty and console war culture. As the war escalated, the year 1994 proved to be the biggest year yet for gamers, and it would be a year few would soon forget. The TurboGrafx CD add-on launched virtually with the system in 1989. To many of the time, many of which had still not adopted CD audio in their home due to the high cost of the equipment, the TurboGrafx CD would represent a large leap forward in technology in video gaming. With a capacity of many times over the capacity of a game card or cartridge, the CD was able to offer full Redbook CD quality audio, along with greater graphical fidelity and potentially larger gameplay experiences. The TurboGrafx CD would bring crystal clear music, voice acting, and animated storytelling to the living room years before its rivals would catch on. Yet despite this technical leap, it struggled outside of Japan due to its limited marketing and stiff competition from Nintendo and Sega. The technology really wasn't that different between the TurboGrafx CD and the TurboGrafx 16, with most of the image processing still taking place on the TurboGrafx 16's hardware, but just able to take advantage of the massive storage capacity of a CD. The add-on required a system card to be able to play games, as it needed the extra RAM to load games from CD into console memory. And other than the advanced audio capabilities of a CD, the game's visuals were still generated from the core system itself, and hence early titles were very similar. However, with the introduction of the Super System card, that would allow more RAM and compatibility with its newer CD games. By 1992, NEC sought to simplify and reinvigorate their CD system with the Turbo Duo, which was a sleek all-in-one console that combined the TurboGrafx 16 and its CD-ROM drive into a single unit. The Turbo Duo bundled fan-favorite titles and offered improved compatibility, aiming to capture a larger share of the North American market. Overall, even though the system was designed into a single board, the system's capabilities weren't really improved much. The main feature it added was additional RAM to handle the higher capacity games. Though beloved by its hardcore fans for its fast-paced shooters, RPGs, and vibrant soundtracks, the Turbo Duo remained a novel system and was an impressive pioneer overshadowed by bigger players. Let's take a look at a few of the games only possible through the CD add-on. I'm going to use my Turbo Duo because it is compatible with all of the games that I have. Here you are seeing the boot process in real time, and you can see about how long it would take to get into a game. The other launch title that accompanied Fighting Street was the game Monster Lair, which was known as Wonder Boy 3 Monster Lair worldwide. And out of the two launch titles, this one would be my preferred game. This game balances basic concepts found in both platformers and arcade shooters. The game itself appears to be a game that could have easily been done on a HuCard cartridge. However, where the game differs is in its fully sampled CD audio soundtrack. And though I am a fan of the late 80s synth soundtrack of this game, it may seem like an odd choice today that they went with a fully synth soundtrack and just sampled it. I assume this was a cheaper way to do it, but if you're going to go all out with a CD quality soundtrack, you might as well invest into it. As an introduction to the system, it may not make it worth the high price tag at the time, but this is a game I do enjoy to play on my Turbo Duo time and again. When the Turbo Duo launched, it came with a 3-in-1, packed-in bundled game, though technically it had 4 if you knew how to unlock Bomberman via a code.
Ooga bunk. Daba duba. Ooga mooga.
But from the menu selection screen, this game offered 3 different titles. 2 of them were previous HuCard games that was the system's mascot, as well as a title that could showcase the CD capabilities.
Gate of Thunder.
Looking at a bundled-in title with the Turbo Duo, Gate of Thunder is a side-scrolling shooter that is fast-paced and fluid with an excellent soundtrack and sharp visuals. Although this game is very good, I would say I might prefer Lords of Thunder instead, which is one of the best shoot-'em-ups of the era with tight controls, gorgeous visuals, and a blistering heavy metal soundtrack that pushed CD audio to its limits. Ys Book 1 and 2 was a genre-defining CD title with stunning music, as well as one of the earliest to include voice acting and cinematic storytelling. This game alone would justify the CD add-on for many fans. And I will say if you're a fan of classic RPGs, this title does hold up for you, but it may be lacking some modern updates for some.
Are you here to rescue me? How wonderful it would be to escape these chains. I have been locked up here for too long.
Another RPG that I would recommend is Cosmic Fantasy II, as it is one of the earliest examples of anime-style storytelling in a US RPG release, complete with full voice acting and animated cutscenes.
This place sure brings back a lot of memories.
Look, it's finished! Oh, Van, this will keep us together forever, right?
Valis 2 is an action platformer that offers anime-style cutscenes, voice acting, and classic hack-and-slash gameplay. While it might feel a bit dated now, it was a strong early CD effort that showed what the format could offer.
I am the Red Salamander Zaruga, one of Roglus's 12 generals. Come, warrior Vari, let's engage in combat!
Some fans of this CD add-on recommended Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective to me, and although I can see that it offered an early use of full-motion video with live actors, but for me this is more of a historical curiosity, as it demonstrates what the CD format's potential would be for cinematic games. Taking a look at how the cinematic videos play on this system, you can tell that they were pushing the system past its limit, trying to get it to play a smooth full-motion video.
This early in the morning.
Indeed, Holmes. It's irresponsible of the Times to play upon people's superstitions.
Ah, you must be referring to the affair of the mummy's curse.
And though overall this system has a very limited library, especially considering the price you would have to dump into this back in the day, and even still today, the top game for me personally on this system is one that didn't even come out in the US, but it can be played on your system as it is region-free if you import it. And that is Dracula X Rondo of Blood. Before Symphony of the Night, this game would be a high watermark for the Castlevania series. The game has a phenomenal graphics style, combined with an excellent soundtrack, and everything the Castlevania series would become known for in the future. If you are a fan of this series, or you have a Turbo Duo, I would definitely recommend getting this title if you can get your hands on it. The Sega CD released in 1992 in the US, and although it was originally released as an add-on to the Sega Genesis Model 1, most will probably be more familiar with the Sega Genesis Model 2 and Sega CD 2 add-on. Sega's goal was to extend the life and capabilities of the Genesis by adding CD-ROM technology, which promised vastly increased storage capacity compared to cartridges, and allowed for full-motion video, CD-quality audio, and larger, more complex games. Sega saw the CD format as a way to maintain its technological superiority, despite the Genesis being older hardware compared to the newer Super Nintendo. The Sega CD featured a faster CPU, improved audio hardware with multiple sound channels, and enhanced graphical capabilities such as scaling and rotation effects, which the base Genesis could not perform on its own natively. Despite its innovative features, the Sega CD faced its challenges. Its bulky design and high price tag made it a tough sell for many consumers. While some games like Sonic CD, Lunar, Eternal Blue, and Night Trap showcased the system's multimedia potential, a significant portion of the library relied heavily on full-motion video sequences, often at the expense of gameplay quality. This led to criticism that the system was more of a novelty than a must-have upgrade. Marketing the Sega CD also created internal friction within Sega. Sega of America pushed aggressively for the add-on, whereas Sega of Japan had different priorities, causing coordination issues. Nonetheless, Sega managed to leverage the Sega CD to maintain consumer interest in the Genesis during the early 90s. Ultimately, while the Sega CD expanded the concept of what a home console could do and helped pave the way for future multimedia gaming, it did not achieve widespread commercial success. It remains a fascinating chapter in the 16-bit era, an early experiment in the bridging of traditional cartridge gaming with emerging CD technology, setting the stage for the next generation of home video game consoles. Let's take a look at a few of the games for the Sega CD. Whenever you're booting up the Sega CD, it has this classic intro tune that will play, although if you let it sit at the menu screen for a while, it kinda goes off the rails and just keeps going.
Emergency. Bogies approaching. All interceptors scramble now. Repeat. Bogies. All interceptors scramble immediately.
Sylphied was one of the standout titles for the Sega CD, showcasing what the add-on can do when pushed to its limits. Developed by Game Arts, it's a vertical scrolling shooter that set itself apart by overlaying polygonal-style ships and effects on top of full-motion video backgrounds. While the gameplay itself was relatively straightforward, dodging enemy fire and blasting waves of opponents, the presentation was nothing short of stunning for 1993. At a time when most shooters stuck to sprite-based visuals, Sylphied created the illusion of 3D space battles that felt cinematic and cutting edge. Its significance lies not just in the gameplay, but how it demonstrated the Sega CD's ability to deliver an absolute audiovisual spectacle that couldn't be replicated on cartridge-based hardware alone. Star Wars Rebel Assault brought the galaxy far, far away to Sega CD owners in 1993, delivering one of the most ambitious uses of full-motion video and digitized graphics on the system. The game retold classic Star Wars battles through a mix of rail shooting and arcade-style sequences, putting players in the cockpit of an X-Wing or behind the blaster of a Rebel soldier. While the controls can feel stiff and the gameplay somewhat limited compared to cartridge-based titles, the sheer spectacle of flying through digitized asteroid fields and trench runs was unlike anything Genesis players had seen before. Its significance lies in how it both highlighted the strengths and weaknesses of the Sega CD, offering cinematic immersion and recognizable Star Wars imagery, but at the cost of interactivity and fluid gameplay. Night Trap is perhaps the most infamous title in the Sega CD library, remembered less for its gameplay than the controversy it sparked. Released in 1992, it was an interactive movie where players monitored security cameras in a house and triggered traps to capture invading vampires. While the acting was campy and the video quality quite grainy, the novelty of controlling a live-action story was groundbreaking at its time, but as a game, it's more of a curiosity than a classic. However, as a cultural milestone, Night Trap is one of the most important titles in the history of the Sega CD.
In the 8th year of the KO era, Japan neared the end of its feudal period.
And I wasn't there to stop them! I hate this! Hyper Cutie Bunny Chase!
KO Flying Squadron is one of the standout hidden gems of the Sega CD, showcasing just how charming and vibrant the system could be when developers leaned into its strengths. Released in 1993, it's a colorful side-scrolling shooter where players control a young girl named Rami, riding a flying dragon, battling through whimsical, anime-inspired stages filled with quirky enemies and over-the-top bosses. The crisp, hand-drawn visuals and catchy CD-quality soundtrack help it stand out from the darker FMV-heavy titles that dominated the Sega CD. While the game is relatively short, it demonstrated the console's ability to deliver arcade-style action with personality and polished. Today it's remembered both as a cult classic and one of the rarest, most sought-after Sega CD releases. Batman Returns is considered one of the system's best showcase titles, taking the side-scrolling brawler formula from its Genesis counterpart and enhancing it with cinematic flair. What really sets this title apart is the inclusion of the exclusive driving stages, placing players behind the wheel of the Batmobile in thrilling Mode 7-style chase sequences, powered by the Sega CD scaling and rotation effects. These sequences, paired with the moody CD quality soundtrack and atmospheric cutscenes, gave the game a more immersive, movie-like feel than most adaptations of the time. Snatcher is perhaps the Sega CD's crown jewel, a cinematic cyberpunk adventure directed by Hideo Kojima that blended graphic novel storytelling with light gun-style shooting sequences. Set in a dystopian future heavily inspired by Blade Runner, this game follows investigator Gillian Seed as he unravels the mystery of humanoid machines known as Snatchers. What made this release so significant was that it was the only official English localization of the game, introducing Western audiences to Kojima's storytelling long before Metal Gear Solid would make him a household name. With atmospheric voice acting, a haunting CD-quality soundtrack, and a gripping narrative, Snatcher pushed the boundaries of what video games could achieve in terms of mature storytelling, cementing its reputation as one of the most important and sought-after titles in the Sega CD library.
Metal, introduce yourself.
Yes, sir. Pleased to meet you, Gillian. I am Metal Gear Mop 2. I am programmed to be your personal assistant.
Widely regarded as one of the best games in the Sonic series, Sonic CD showcased the Sega CD's strengths with its vibrant visuals, animated cutscenes, and an unforgettable CD-quality soundtrack. Building on the fast-paced platforming formula, Sonic CD introduced the innovative time travel mechanic, allowing players to visit past, present, and future versions of each stage, changing level layouts and outcomes depending on the player's performance. This game also marked the debut of fan-favorite characters Amy Rose and Metal Sonic. While it doesn't stray too far from the classic Sonic formula, its polish, creativity, and style made it a standout title, not only proving the Sega CD could deliver high-quality experiences, but also cementing Sonic CD as one of the most celebrated Sonic games ever made. And that is just a few of the games I am going to mention from its library, but there are several other titles that could have easily made my list to highlight what the system could do. If you're interested for more titles, I definitely recommend my Ultimate Sega CD review, where I review these titles and more with greater detail. Around the time that Sega announced they were developing a CD add-on in Japan, Nintendo itself also had plans for its own CD-based expansion. In the now infamous partnership, Nintendo teamed up with Sony in the late 1980s to develop a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo, known internally as the PlayStation. The deal with Sony would have allowed Nintendo to take advantage of larger storage and CD-quality audio, while keeping pace with the Sega CD and the NEC's TurboGrafx CD. However, due to internal conflicts, Nintendo grew wary of Sony gaining too much control over licensing and media formats. All this contention came to a head at the 1991 CES show when Nintendo shocked Sony by publicly announcing a new partnership with Philips, effectively blindsiding Sony as they had no idea they weren't working with Nintendo anymore until this happened. And even though the Sony-Nintendo deal collapsed, the aftermath was seismic. Sony would take their CD-based technology and development work, and instead of walking away, they would refine it into a brand new standalone console known as the PlayStation. Though it would take a few years for Nintendo's mistake to catch up to them, ultimately their decision to cancel the deal would cost them dearly in the years ahead, as Sony and their PlayStation would go on to dominate the next two console generations. Ultimately, the deal between Nintendo and Philips would also dissolve, with no physical CD add-on ever being released for the Super Nintendo. Though, as a result of the deal between Nintendo and Philips, there were some Nintendo properties that were licensed for their platform, the CDI, and those are a take it or leave it kind of quality.
Nice of the princess to invite us over for a picnic, eh, Luigi? I hope she made lots of spaghetti.
Often remembered as one of Nintendo's most unusual licensing experiments, Hotel Mario took the beloved Mario franchise in a direction few expected. Released exclusively for the Philips CDI, the game replaced traditional platforming with a door-closing puzzle mechanic, where Mario and Luigi battle Bowser and the Koopalings by shutting doors across a series of themed hotels. The gameplay itself is simple and repetitive, but the game became infamous for its clunky controls and awkwardly designed levels. A standout for me are the full-motion video cutscenes, featuring offbeat animation and odd voice acting that has since become the stuff of internet memes. Hotel Mario is far from the high standards set by Nintendo's mainline titles, but it stands today as a fascinating, if misguided, piece of gaming history that showcases the pitfalls of Nintendo letting out its characters without oversight. In Link the Faces of Evil and Zelda the Wand of Gamelon, they were released side by side in 1993, and actually these titles set an historical landmark for the series as you were able to control Zelda for the first time, though not in the way that fans hoped. Built on nearly identical engines, both games play as a side-scrolling action-adventure game with stiff controls, awkward hit detection, and confusing progression. What has kept them alive in gaming memory, however, are again the bizarre full-motion animated cutscenes, which feature crude art, strange voice acting, and surreal dialogue that feel worlds apart from Nintendo's carefully crafted image of the franchise. While derided as some of the weakest entries ever associated with Zelda, they have since earned a cult following, as well as unintended comedy classics. Again, I had a hard time finding myself getting past the first screen in either of these two games. The third CDI entry, released in the 90s, shifted the series back to a more traditional top-down perspective. Unfortunately, slow load times, muddy visuals, and clunky combat made it just as infuriating as its predecessors on the CDI. Instead of colorful animated cutscenes, it used grainy live-action video that has aged even worse than its contemporaries. While ambitious in scope, with a large overworld and dungeons to explore, the technical limitations of the CDI ensured the experience was more than a slog than a grand adventure. Today this game is remembered less for its gameplay, and more for being a final, often forgotten chapter in this experimental and ill-fated licensing deal.
Young princess, please attend me. A traveler of kind intentions has found me at last. I have collapsed with thirst and dryness.
The Nintendo CDI games remain one of the strangest detours in gaming history. Stemming from a failed deal between Nintendo and Philips, these titles borrowed classic iconic characters, but lacked the magic that made them beloved. Awkward gameplay, questionable design, and bizarre animated cutscenes turn them into infamous oddities. Yet over time, their very flaws have cemented them as cult curiosities, mocked in memes, remembered in YouTube parodies, and studied as what not to do in game design. They may not shine as great games, but their legacy as unforgettable missteps ensure they will never be forgotten. Before I reveal my pick for the best CD console add-on, here's how you all voted in the poll. While each system brings something to the table that's different and unique, I would say the Sega CD takes the crown as the premier CD add-on for the 16-bit era. The Sega CD offers superior technical horsepower with its dual CPU architecture, expanded RAM, and enhanced graphics features like scaling rotation and full motion video, which gave developers a powerful platform to push the boundaries of what home gaming could offer. Initially, when I was going through the game library, I wasn't expecting to find very many games that I liked playing, but the Sega CD kept surprising me. Though there are a lot of FMV titles that I don't feel are very desirable, there are some games that definitely take advantage and are very well worth playing, but just know that playing these experiences on original hardware will come with a high price tag. Despite its bulky design and higher price point, the Sega CD's marketing muscle, library size, and technical advancements made it the most influential and widely recognized CD add-on of its generation. Coming in second, I would pick the TurboGrafx CD, but moreover, I would actually pick the Turbo Duo. However, collecting one of these systems is going to be quite a challenge as the system is quite rare here in the US. The Turbo Duo, however, can play a wider variety of games because it has the Super System card built in, and some of my favorite games for the system require that higher amount of RAM in the Super System card. Though the TurboGrafx CD is my runner-up in this category, I will note that it does have the distinction of being the first pioneering CD technology in home video game consoles. And those that grew up with this system still love it dearly today. There is also one other significant hardware add-on that we released during the 16-bit era, but I will circle back to this later. On the next installment of the 16-bit war, it's time to dig into the game library of each console and compare them. Then I'll take a look at the year 1994, what I consider to be the definitive year of the 16-bit war. A winner will be declared, and then we'll take a look at the legacy that this war has had on the industry. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A special thanks to those Patreons you see on screen. Also, if you like what you see, please remember to leave a like and click that subscribe button on your way out. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.